Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting adventure reading with Grandma. Today, we're going to be reading some stories that my mother wrote. She just turned 91 this past February, and she's still going strong. The story we're reading right now is the one she just wrote about 2 weeks ago. She said the idea for the name and the story popped into her head. She sat down at her computer, and off she went. So this is the story that she wrote. It is called Mrs. Stufflebean. Mrs. Stufflebean lived in a little round house with square doors and oval windows. Everyone said what an odd house Mrs. Stufflebean had, but the children loved to stop by Mrs. Stufflebean's house. She loved the children, and she always gave out cookies to any child who happened to stop by her house. Mrs. Stufflebean loved baking cookies, and she shaped them in really cute shapes. Round ones, oval ones, heart-shaped, and some shaped in rather odd squares. Everyone who had eaten her cookies said how good they were, how good they tasted. It pleased her to give out cookies to the children that happened to stop by, and she always made sure she had plenty of cookies on hand to give out to the children. One day a homeless man wandered down the street. He looked around, and he spotted Mrs. Stufflebean's house. He was curious as to who would live in such a strange-shaped house. So he knocked on her door. Now the homeless man was very dirty and very raggedy, and he was hungry. He knocked on Mrs. Stufflebean's door, hoping for a handout. Mrs. Stufflebean hurried to answer her door. There might be a little boy or girl on her doorstep, hoping for a cookie. When she opened the door, she didn't see a little girl or boy there. She saw the dirty, raggedy man standing there instead. She took a step backwards. First of all, she didn't expect to see the man standing there, and such a dirty, raggedy one. For a minute, she didn't know what to do. Then she said, "I might give you something to eat, but first, I think you need to wash up a bit. Would you like to take a nice tub bath?" The dirty, raggedy man said, "I would love to soak in a tub of nice, warm water. I know how I must look awful, but I do not have a home or any place to take a nice tub bath." Mrs. Stufflebean opened the door wider and invited the dirty, raggedy man inside. Now, Mrs. Stufflebean had a nice and cozy home. She also had a cute little black and white kitten to keep her company. Yes, Mrs. Stufflebean let this little black and white kitten into her home because the little kitty needed a place to stay, and Mrs. Stufflebean had room in her nice little house, and she enjoyed the kitten's company. And the little kitten was warm and purred softly as Mrs. Stufflebean held her on her lap. After she had finished all her work, each evening she would sit in her living room and hold the kitten on her lap and pet her till she fell asleep. And sometimes Mrs. Stufflebean dozed off to sleep for a while, too. Now, why do you suppose Mrs. Stufflebean would let a perfect stranger into her home and offer him a chance to clean himself up? Well, mainly because the stranger needed to know there are still people out there in the world who cared about other people and would be willing to give them a chance. Maybe the person would change, and maybe they would also give something back if they had been given a chance. As they climbed the stairs to the bathroom, Mrs. Stufflebean looked the man up and down. "I think you're about the same size of my late husband. Just come along, and I'll get some of his clothes that I have in the closet." Then she looked down at his feet and asked him what size shoes he wore. The dirty, raggedy man replied, "If I remember correctly, I wear a size 9 shoe." "You're in luck," Mrs. Stufflebean said. "This is just the size that my late husband wore, and I think I have a pair or two of that same closet." Mrs. Stufflebean quickly gathered the clothes and a pair of shoes and handed them to the man before he went into the bathroom. She also handed the dirty, raggedy man a razor and a comb. Now, you do suppose that Mrs. Stufflebean let a perfect stranger, especially a dirty, raggedy one, into her home and even offered him a bath to clean himself up. It probably wasn't a good idea. But that was because Mrs. Stufflebean trusted everyone, and she knew this man needed someone to give him a chance. While the dirty, raggedy man was cleaning himself up, Mrs. Stufflebean had been busy. She made a pot of coffee and fixed a plate of sandwiches. She also put a plate of homemade cookies on the table. So when the man, no longer dirty and raggedy, but all washed up and in clean clothes and clean shaven, came into the kitchen, Mrs. Stufflebean invited him to have a seat and to help himself to the food she had fixed. As he sat down to eat, he thanked Mrs. Stufflebean for trusting him, for allowing him to take a nice warm bath for a change, and for the clothes and the shoes she gave him. He was no longer a dirty, raggedy man. Now that's not quite the end of the story. You see, Mrs. Stufflebean told the man there was an apartment over the garage that was empty, and no one lived in it now. She told him he was welcome to stay there until he was able to find a job and maybe even a different place for him to stay. And then Mrs. Stufflebean said to the man, "I didn't even ask your name. Please tell me who you are." "My name is Stanley Muffleburger. I don't tell everyone my name, as they usually make fun of it." Mrs. Stufflebean said, "I think it is a good name. Besides, a mother gave you that name, and there is nothing nicer than a mother, is there?" As it turns out, Mr. Muffleburger turned out to be a good handyman. He mowed Mrs. Stufflebean's lawn and shoveled the snow off the sidewalks in winter, and he even helped her clean out the garage. He sure was very helpful. The neighbors got to know one another better, and before long they were getting together for neighborhood picnics and soon became close friends. And it wasn't very long until Mrs. Stufflebean became Mrs. Muffleburger. And that is the end of our story of Mrs. Stufflebean. So in the comments below, leave me a comment on what you think this story meant and what do you think you learned from this story, what it teaches you. I have a good idea. I'd like to hear from all my viewers and my listeners. So enjoy the story. Read it with your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters, just by yourself. It doesn't matter. Listen to it with everybody. And then leave a comment. Hit the bell you'll know when I notify you. When I read some more, because you'll be notified. Subscribe if you haven't already. And have a super great day. Bye now.